Hey there, YouTube. Welcome back to Melanie Loves Death Metal. Today, I am incredibly honored to have Cody from Afterbirth with me. This is my official, second interview on my channel. And as everybody knows, you guys have probably already seen my top 10 death metal albums of the year is already out. It's been out for about a week now. And Afterbirth, in but not of, was my favorite death metal album on the year. So I'm really happy to have Cody here to talk about that today. And we'll get a little bit into some of the releases that have also come out this year that we both have enjoyed. And we'll talk a little bit more about some stuff like that. For the most part, Cody, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so happy that you agreed to do this. Like I said, Afterbirth's album, from the moment I heard it, I think back in September or August when I got the promo, was pretty much donned my favorite album as soon as I heard it. So thank you once again for joining. This is really cool. This is kind of what I was hoping my channel would turn into. It was getting to talk to bands about their music. So
happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Pleasure.
Yeah. So one thing for anybody who may not be familiar with Afterbirth, the band is out of New York and they have two other albums out that were previously on Unique Leader Records. They're currently on Willow Tip. I do want to say, if you have not heard those previous albums, definitely go check them out, because although I do think that this latest album is slightly different sounding than past, but there's still a lot of the same sound that you guys have carried on from your past albums into this. I think you've just created more of a progression from there. But I do want to say the Time Traveler's Dilemma has been one of my favorite brutal death metal style of albums I've listened to the last several years since this has come out, to the point of where I think I maybe have bought this twice now, because I also have a cassette version of it.
Nice.
But when I first heard this album, the latest one, I noticed that something was a little bit different about it, because I noticed that you're credited for doing the artwork and layouts for the first two albums, and then for the latest album, the artwork was, you ended up hiring an actual artist for this particular artist. What was kind of the, I guess I wanted to ask, what was the background around generating the artwork, and what decided to maybe, do you have an art background or a graphic design background, and just decided oh, maybe we should do something different for this album?
Yeah. So that question is multi-layered, so I'll just address some of it. So the actual artwork on Time Travelers and Four Dimensional Flesh, the actual visual artwork was not done by me, but rather an artist named Kishore Hollenbeek, who I became aware of. I don't remember exactly how. I just hooked up with him. He was in a band called Black Harvest. He's a musician in a couple other bands, and we just became very friendly through music, and I liked his art, so we began to work together. But I did do the layout, and I did do the graphic design. That part is true, but I just credit where credit is due. Kishore did the visual artwork on both. The first Time Travelers album, that's like a digital image that he threw together. Excuse me. And the Four Dimensional Flesh cover art is a painting. I think it's 3 feet by 3 feet. It's a huge painting that he did. And so, moving on from there, I do have an art background, been painting, drawing, making stuff my whole life. I went to school, a local community college for art. Well, even before that, I was taking all sorts of art courses in middle school and high schools, special courses that not everybody else was taking. And my mom, even before that, when I was younger, she would sort of drag me to special art camps, maybe, or programs, that were just on a Saturday or a Friday night at wherever. I did actually also end up going to School of Visual Arts in New York City for a while. After I left the community college I was going to for graphic design, I majored in illustration, and I was in School of Visual Arts for a while. That I ended up leaving School of Visual Arts. I was much younger than I am now, and it was my first time being out of the house and very overwhelmed, by school and living on my own and having to work and pay bills and commute on the subway, which was all fascinating, a fascinating time for me, but it was also very overwhelming. Financially, it was very difficult as well. So I just decided, sort of in just like a youthful blaze, to just stop going. And I think I was definitely like upset about the decision to stop going to school visual arts, but I sort of like made up for it with just, I don't know, just I pretended like it never happened. I'm like, oh, that never happened to me. Um, Never gave up on art. Obviously, I was still making art for a while. It was actually after I left school visual arts that I just found some interesting painting techniques and styles that worked for me. I kind of felt like after I left school visual arts that I found, like, I guess what people call their voice, their artistic voice, and I was like doing stuff that felt like bona fide, genuinely 100% me. I was like, I've never done anything like this before. I don't see anyone else doing this. So I feel like I sort of like put it together in my head that leaving art school equals finding like your true artistic voice, which may or may not be true, but that's just how it happened. And just painting, drawing, making collages ever since. And, I still have it in my mind that one day when my kids are grown and I'm retired, maybe I can like get back to actually like painting in like a studio that I don't have to hide harmful chemicals from sneaky children. I don't have to worry about, work commitments. I'm still like gunning for that, even though in this late capitalistic society, I feel like the odds are ever stacked against me and other dreamers. But whatever, I'll keep dreaming.
Yeah. Yeah,
Those,
I know what you mean. I have two kids who are 5 and 8 years old, and I really, really like. I grew up playing like guitar, and I was in symphonic band and like jazz band and all that stuff. And
nice.
I really want to start getting back into it and maybe joining like a community symphonic band or stuff like that. But at the same time, it's like my kids are still really young, so like hopefully
Yeah,
I'm deeming for that one day of when there's a little bit of independence there where I'll be able to go back to some of that creative stuff that I'm used to doing. But for now, I have
yeah,
YouTube that I'm
and
doing that with.
yeah. This is your outlet. You're creative in your own way. Like you bring your individualistic flair and style, to it. And I
Yeah.
can, guarantee you, Melanie, that like I have a 14-year-old stepson. This is like a child from my wife's previous relationship, and I've known him since he was 5, but now he's 15 almost, and things do get easier in a way in terms of like space and time and like things, and you have more time for yourself. Um, they become different problematically, like when they're teenagers,
Yeah.
but like
Yeah, for sure.
you can do the things maybe you used to do like a little bit more. So that and their 8 is not too far away from 14. So
Yeah. That's as soon as you say that, it does he listen to any of the music that you write or play? No, not
now
into it.
they my stepson and my wife just think death metal is weird.
Yeah.
They don't make fun of me for it. Like they don't like they don't like hold it against me. They don't tell me it's stupid. They don't like belittle me for it. They just don't get it. Bottom
Yeah.
line. And
Yeah.
that's fine. I don't need them to like it. When my stepson was younger and I would have to like drive him back and forth from his dad's house and stuff, we would have a lot of time in the car and I would play a lot of music, and maybe with the hope that it would rub off on him, but it just didn't. I guess he's kind of into music, but not really. He's sort of a typical teenager. He does enjoy video games, which I don't, but I think video games are fine. They're awesome. I just
Mhm.
have no interest in them. Very, very creative video games are, but I'm just not into it. And I think video game music is really awesome. And it's really evolved, from its sort of like 8-bit glory,
Mhm.
when I was growing up, which I still think is awesome. Like ancient video game music from the 80s and the 90s is awesome. But now it's like you can really hear like real music, like bands, like artists will like literally be in Fortnite, which is just blows
Yep.
my mind. Um,
Yeah.
but he's more into hip hop, which is fine. I have nothing against hip hop, but I know nothing about it. It's not ever been a genre of music that's moved me, and I have no apologies for that. It's like I've tried many types of music, and I'm like, it's not me. It's fine. It's absolutely fine. I adored it. Hip hop and rap, super creative, super talented people, just not what I like, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they're still relatively young, but my son is, he's a dancer and he's like in competition dances and all that stuff. And so a lot of the dances that he does is very like pop centric and hip hop oriented. So that's a lot of the music that he's into.
Hmm.
But every once in a while, they'll hear something coming out of my office, like Metallica or Slayer or something like that, a little bit more digestible for their ears that they'll enjoy. But for the most part, the death metal stuff is totally lost on like my
Yep.
wife and my kids. Like they just don't. They do appeal to the imagery.
Mhm.
So like for the new album art, like I know for a fact, like if my son saw this, he would think that that was super cool. But for the most part, I try to censor it as much as possible because death metal artwork can be a little bit
Yeah.
too much
Oh
for a
yeah.
younger
Oh
generation.
yeah.
Um, but that is the one thing about this band in particular, like your band in particular, is that your artwork is very much in line with the type of music that you guys are writing, and I like and that's generally like the aesthetic across the board for death metal as a whole. And I mentioned this a while back, but in terms of like brutal death metal, which is one of my favorite like metal micro genres,
Yeah.
um, it, the whole of like body dismemberment and misogyny and stuff like that that kind of goes into the album artwork is
Mhm.
like you guys just don't do that, but you have like that brutal death metal sound. So that
Mhm.
was always one thing that I appreciated about your band, like because again, I still listen to a lot of that older school brutal death metal where a lot of that's still very relevant, but it is nice to
Sure.
see like as we're getting more progressed into the genre that's starting to go away. So that was one of the things that pretty much drew me to Afterbirth. Also, your album covers definitely like I remember the first time I ever heard Four Dimensional Flesh. Like I assumed that was going to just be like an atmospheric, like just a regular atmospheric, like kind of death metal, like heavy metal record. And I was blown away. I was like, okay, this is not what I thought it was going to be. So I always feel like that your band is so unique within the genre that it's almost refreshing to a point because
Cool.
yeah, that's what I've been trying to explain to everybody this year, like with your new album is, and I said it like my top 10 uh like death metal albums of the year. Like I can't really explain what it is about this album that I love so much, other than that there's just so many varying elements to it that
Mhm.
as like a music geek that I am, uh it's so like pleasing to the ears, even
Yeah.
though you've still got Will's like gurgling
Yeah.
vocals
He's
and
there.
there's
Sure.
still yeah, but it's like you're writing this really like almost beautiful, like well composed songs, and then he has like the brutal death metal vocal style that goes over it, and it somehow works perfectly for me. Um,
Yeah.
and that is like that's just generally the best way I can explain it. But if I were to like suggest this to somebody who's new into like death metal or trying
Mhm.
to like learn it and get into it, like I would give it a little bit before
Yeah.
that. Like I
Nah,
always
I don't
feel.
think so. I don't think so.
Yeah. But I wanted to ask because I don't I'm just curious, like what are some of like the influences that you guys have? Because a lot of artists use like past bands that they really enjoy or like they grew up with. Like what are some of the influences that when you guys get together and write your music that you feel like pours into your albums? Because like for me, I hear some things that sound similar, especially on this album, to like Deftones, just kind of in
Yeah.
that era. Like they're
Absolutely.
like their earlier work, not so much maybe their newer stuff. And then on the Terminus podcast, they mentioned Tool, which I didn't think that until they brought it up, and now I'm like, I kind of hear like a little bit of like the Justin Chancellor bass like riffage, but you
Yeah.
mentioned that Tool was not a thought. But yeah, just so what are some of the influences around your
Um,
music style?
I actually thought about the Tool thing and the Terminus podcast. Before I answer that question, I want to just go back to your first question really quick about the art, because I didn't
Yep.
address this angle of it. So the reason we chose another artist for this third album, In But Not Of, was because I'm just simply too busy with
Yeah.
life to like really deal with any of it. I was like, I just have to find someone, and I'll just have to. It have to be someone I really like, and I'll just, and it has to be someone who's more than just like a visual artist, but
Mhm.
graphically speaking, can sort of like walk themselves around like a CD and vinyl template and, make it look good. So that's why we chose Alex Ekman Lawn, because I know, he's an amazing artist, but also graphically, like, he makes things work. So I just kind of like trusted it. There was like just a small amount of back and forth, but hardly any like massive revisions. Like, I'm very easy to work with, like, artistically. Like, I'm mostly just like, bowled over by anyone else that also does art and can give me something remotely similar to what we might be thinking. So it was like very easy to work with them, and I was just too busy to do it on my own. That's why we chose him. Plus, also, being on Willow Tip, we thought, why not work with a new artist, sort of do something a little bit different, just right foot forward sort of thing, just a different stage or era of the band, whatever that means, just a little different, just not doing the exact same thing. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that, give, again, props where props are due. So you were asking about influences, right? And bands that may or may not be part of like our musical soup. So you mentioned Deftones. I'm definitely a huge Deftones fan. I know Keith, the drummer, is. And they're a band that I've kept up with, and I think Keith has too. Like,
Mhm.
I just always liked them. I never thought they like fell out of style. I don't love every album they put out, but like, they never really disappointed me, and I just always liked what they were doing, like musically, lyrically, vocally. It was just always something that engaged with me. Um, and definitely like transcends the new metal tag. It's just like, this is so not the very one-dimensional prototypical new metal that most people think. The uninitiated think Deftones, and they just lump them into a lot of other bands, and it's like, okay, there's definitely similarities, that's fine, no argument there, but there's so much more. um I always, like the guitar, especially. I'm a guitarist, so I always gravitate
Yeah.
towards the guitar. It just makes sense to me, and they've always felt very like emotionally driven somehow, like the guitar work. I'm like, oh, I just feel that like viscerally, like deeply, a lot of the times. Like, I can't explain it any more than that. So I mean, Deftones are definitely like somewhere in there for sure.
Mhm.
As I've gotten older, I can't really like pinpoint like major influences though. There's like too much music like behind me, I guess, to really say, well, it's this or it's that. But I guess, if I wanted to be like pretty succinct about it, like, I've never lost the allure of Suffocation. Like, from that very first time I ever heard, Effigy of the Forgotten just, drop on, my CD player when I was like 15. So like, I'm always coming somewhere from like a Suffocation-esque perspective. Not in a way that I feel like I want to mimic them or anything, but it's almost like part of my DNA now. And even more to the point, like, when I first heard Suffocation, I just thought, this is my music. Like, when you hear something, you're like, oh,
Yeah.
like, I didn't ever know I was looking for this or needing this, but like, holy moly, like, this is it.
Mhm.
My search is over, Um, and then there's like another band for me, and I know the other guys really like Suffocation too. Like, Will and I are like the bigger death metal guys in the band. Um, Speaking for myself, like, I've never lost the fanboyism of Suffocation. Like, I buy all their albums. I like all the things they've done. Okay, sure. Hymns to
Mhm.
Apocrypha is not Effigy the Forgotten. Doesn't
Right.
have to be. Doesn't have to be. Like, I
Yeah.
still think it's dope as fuck, and I really, really like it. I just love Suffocation, and I know Will maybe doesn't feel quite the same about their newer stuff, but like, respect, obviously. Um, and Dave, bass player, used to be or is still a Suffocation fan. He's just maybe not as into death metal as I still am, which is fine. It actually makes for like a really interesting musical interactions. Another band for me, this is going way back too, back to the '90s, but sort of on a different level, is this band called Hum, like an alternative rock band, from like the mid '90s, we'll say late '90s. that again, I heard an album that they released in '95 called "You'd Prefer an Astronaut," and I never did know I was looking or needing something like that, but I heard it. I was like, "This is it. This is my people right here." So I think for me, like a large part of what I write is almost like, how can I make Suffocation and Hum musically compatible? Somehow, I don't know. I don't try to make that happen. Again, their Hum are also part of my musical DNA, and I'm just
Mhm.
like, I just think it's both on some level, the Suffocation and the Hum style are coming together. And of course, that's putting it very simply, and it's not just as simple as that. But I think that's somewhat to the point of the question, maybe too
Yeah.
abstract. I don't know.
Yeah. I was gonna ask, like, who has the prog background? Because a lot of the tones that you guys put on this album has got a very proggy feel to it. Even more so than I know you have like a noise and ambient background as well.
Yeah,
And there's
yeah,
definitely some of that on this as too. But the progginess of this album, I think, is probably what I outside of Will's vocalist. So I should admit, like, Will is probably one of my favorite death metal vocalists, just across
yeah.
the
He's awesome.
board with
Yeah,
Afterbirth and then Artificial Brain and then the new Reeking Aura album that came out
yeah,
last year. And I think I probably put him up on the pedestal because like Frank Mullen is probably my all-time favorite death metal vocalist. And
absolutely.
then yeah, yeah, like he just and that was a big reason why I was a little bit sad about the new Suffocation album, just because, but it is a good album, and I'm the same exact way when it comes to that band. Like I think I'll always be a fan no
Yeah,
matter what they put out. But
absolutely.
yeah, like the progginess on this album, and I say prog, and I feel like it always scares people, especially when they're just like the meat and potatoes death metal fan. They're like, oh, it's pretentious. But I
Yeah,
don't get that pretension at all when I'm listening to this album because you still have like the brutal death metal style vocals in there.
yeah,
Um, and you're blending styles of music together that is not natural to somebody's ear, especially when they're just, used to only listening to bands like, Suffocation and Deicide and stuff like that.
yeah.
But yeah, I was wondering if there was any sort of a prog background, like if anybody else in the band played in any sort of proggier style of music or just anything like that.
Yeah. So on some level, like the prog term, I totally dig it and I get it. I definitely listen to music that I think is like progressive.
Yeah,
It doesn't necessarily have to be like metal. It doesn't have to be like,
right.
I don't know. It doesn't have to be like Dream Theater, but
Or yeah, yeah.
or whatever. Like as far as all right. So to answer your question, I think Keith, the drummer, he's more of the prog backbone. Like he just always adds like that more just progressive flair to like the drums. There's like it's technical in a way, but it's like groovy and accessible in a way at the
Mhm,
same time. Like I guess you don't have to like work so hard to like get into it or to understand it or to like write out the time signatures on paper and like figure out what we're doing. Like maybe there's like a slight bit of that, but Keith is very much into. I'm gonna go ahead and say Dream Theater, Rush, Pink Floyd, like those band, like surface level stuff. And there's plenty of stuff that I'm sure he listens to that I'm not even aware of. That's more progressive. And then as far as I go, like I do like that stuff. I'm not like the biggest fan of those bands. I more to the point for me, I just appreciate so much music.
mhm,
And I just sort of like take it in, even if I'm not like sitting there listening to and studying those bands. I know that they exist and I listen to their music on occasion and I really enjoy it and I'm taking it in that way. Um, I was like pretty affected by Cynic's debut album Focus when it came out. Um, which is ironic because I'm reading the Scott Burns book that was just put out by Decibel,
yeah,
and it's very clearly mapped out. It goes like year to year, all the demos, all the albums, almost like in order. And the Cynic Focus sessions. It's some chapters or sections are like multiple pages, others are just like one page. The Cynic chapter section is like 4 or 5 pages, and I learned, in the book that was very difficult for the band and for Scott. There was a lot of stuff going on. They were on the cusp of some new technology that they weren't even like ready to like fully comprehend. It was like a lot more money. Um, Scott was even worried that Monty Connor, who's like the Roadrunner guy at the time, signed them based on the strength of their demo and the more death metal stylings of it. But then here they are making this album that had like almost nothing to do with it. And then they went on tour and like they were like ridiculed and like no one really understood it. And I just found that so fascinating because I like as soon as I heard Focus, instant fan. Like I just fell head over heels in love with it. And so I don't understand why people. I don't get like the one dimensional mentality, maybe ignorance even of some death metal people or extreme metal people, not just death metal.
Yeah.
I'm like, what's not to love about this? Like, it's still heavy, it's still aggressive at times, but like, you don't like beautiful things? Like, I'm sorry. Like, who
Yeah.
hurt you? You know, it's just like, so, you know, so that was like a big one for me. And it's such a fantastic album. So early on, like I fell in love with that immediately, but it seems like most of the world didn't. I was just like part of a small handful of people that like really not only appreciated it, but like I'm like I want to marry this album. You know, it's just like it's so good,
Mm.
and I still think it's like so good. So that's in like that sort of progressive death metal or extreme metal has always been important to me. Um, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's sort of
I
like
think
the go
you
ahead.
yeah, you definitely Cynic is probably one of the bands that I don't find myself listening to a whole lot, but when I hear it, I always think to myself like, "Man, I should pay more attention to these albums." Because there's
Yeah.
definitely elements there that I absolutely love, like, especially when it comes to, like, the prog music.
Hmm.
Um, I love when it is put into death metal because I am not a one-dimensional death metal fan at all. Um, I think my channel was pretty much built on that because when I first started it, I showed off a lot of pretty much one-dimensional bands, especially it was in the height of, like, Maggot Stomp's,
Mm.
success too, like, Single Sugabog was already, like, flourishing, 200 Stab Wounds and
Yeah,
Undeath, and, like, they all came from that label, and they're
they
one of
did.
you
Yeah,
know, Scott's label is, like, one of my favorite labels. Um,
yeah.
but also, I have such an extensive music background, I didn't wasn't raised on death metal, I just listened to it because I have an older brother who was into it.
Oh, okay.
But
There you
yeah, so yeah, he's 10 years older than I am, and he's a huge death metal head still to this day. Like we message things back and forth all the time, and he goes to
That's
shows
cool.
still and everything. And I would, sneak into his bedroom and listen to his music because it was the art appealed to me. Like that's what drew me into death metal was the artwork. So I think like Death's Leprosy, like the Ed Repka artwork and all that stuff was literally what I wanted to like. I would see it in his like stack of tapes and be like, I want to listen to that.
Oh, how
But
could you not? It's so shocking in
yeah,
a way, and it's so
right,
and striking. It's like
yeah,
this is crazy looking. Why would you not want to listen to that?
right. And but I was also raised on bands like Genesis and like Pink Floyd and Rush and Yes and like those little bit more proggier bands. And Genesis is one of my all-time favorite bands. I still
Nice.
listen to that all the time.
Hmm.
The thing that's interesting about your album is that your songs are not long at all. Like especially on this album, like they're very like I think the longest song on the album is like 5 minutes, which is
Yeah,
perfect.
that's like the title track is like the longest song on there.
Yeah, awesome song too. I love that song.
Cool.
But also at the same time, like just you guys pack so much in to one song, so many variances, and I always call it like peaks and valleys when
Yeah,
there's stuff like that, to where it's similar to how grind can be, the same exact way. And some people like that I've talked to when listening to this album, like they're like, "Oh, there's got to be a grind influence here," and I was like, "I just
absolutely,
don't."
absolutely.
Yeah, like of course, and you definitely hear that, especially on the first half of the album, like within the first couple of songs, like Devil with Dead Eyes. Like I think that's probably the more faster, aggressive song on the album, one of the more.
Mhm.
Um, and but like also, like, am I hearing a little bit of punk as well? Like some of it feels like a little bit hardcore punkish too with
Yeah,
that song.
it's probably all in there. Like I'm
Yeah,
definitely
for sure.
maybe I might be, and again, like Will and I tend to listen to like to most of the like harder extreme stuff.
Hmm.
But I'm definitely into grindcore, maybe a little bit more than the other guys. And I'm not saying I have like a super deep knowledge of it. There's definitely grindcore bands I don't know. There's definitely grindcore bands I don't really even care about all that much as some people do. Like screw the haters, whatever. Pig Destroyer, Predator in the Yard, like doesn't get better
Oh
than
yeah.
that for my money. Like,
Oh
and I
yeah.
know that's
Oh yeah.
like, oh, that's like mainstream grind. It's like, but whatever, because I also like, I'll put on like Misery Index or whatever by Assuck or something else or whatever by Insect Warfare. It's just it's fine. Like I really like grind because grind is like short, aggressive, sometimes like riff compacted songs in like 50 seconds, a minute, 20 seconds. And it's really creative too. It's just like I love stuff like that. Hardcore punk, I'm not really like the hardcore punk guy, but I appreciate that kind of music. And being on Long Island and in New York in general,
Yeah.
there was like a lot of hardcore, post-hardcore bands that sprouted up the same time death metal was sprouting up. And I have a lot of friends that were maybe more into hardcore or things like that than death metal, but like we were friends and we all hung out. So like I was listening to whatever they were listening to, and I guess they were listening to whatever I was listening to, and just being like really into that stuff. I can't help but think that that definitely like seeped into my brain somehow, and it never seemed like there had to be like a dividing line to me. Like people are so divisive when it comes to music, and I'm like, I don't know. I definitely don't like everything. I'm not going to be that guy because not everything is
Right.
great. But like the things that I do like, are not, are not the same. Like one of these things is not like the other. Like maybe on the surface, but like why can't like hardcore punk influence find its place somewhere in death metal, and why can't grindcore also be somewhere in death metal? Why can't it all just be mixed together? I don't personally try to mix these things together. It's just I think I've listened to a lot of music and I've been exposed to a lot of people that listen to a lot of music, and I'm just like, this is fantastic. Everything is fantastic. Just let it. Just like I'm gonna open up myself to like whatever influence is there, because you know I'm the guy that's always like cheerleading for everyone else in a sense, like, oh, you like this thing, this is awesome. This thing, I don't know what this thing is, and maybe I don't like this thing as much as you do, but like go on with your thing, it's awesome. And I don't know, I just think I wish there was more people like that, so that's
Yeah.
it.
When you guys are writing the album, did anybody in the band say like, this is a little bit too like wonky or weird? I don't know if we should add this in." Like, was there any sort of talk back and forth around that?
No, not really. Like me, Dave, and Keith, like the musicians, guitar,
Mhm.
bass, drums. We just get together and jam, and it's like just generally fun. We have like a good chemistry together, and it's almost like it doesn't even like feel weird whatever we're doing nowadays. It's like we'll just move right from like a blast beat into like something that sounds like The Cure into something that sounds like maybe Sick of It All or Motorhead, back to Insect Warfare, and then back into whatever. And like the three of us, we don't really bat an eye. It might be wonky in the sense that it takes a little while to work out. Like it takes a while to write the songs. That's the
Mhm.
hard part. We don't say, "Oh, this is hard. It doesn't sound right." It's just, "Oh, this is hard because we're going from one style to another, and it's like almost like stop on a dime kind of stuff at times." And it's really just about becoming comfortable with it. But there was never any like censorship, like hardcore censorship. Um, and Will definitely, he's never said anything like that either. Um, by the time we're in the studio, like I'm presenting like the basic structure of the songs to the guys. I pretty much like write the whole song on guitar, and I have loose ideas of what the drums might do, but I have no idea what the bass will do, and I have no idea what Will do. So it's mostly like me and Keith to start, and then Dave just sort of joins in when he's ready. But no one's ever been like, "Oh, this is too weird. This is too wacky. This is," we might have discussed verbally a couple of things, like before we actually like did anything, and like maybe in those discussions, maybe we won't do that this time, but that was only like once or twice, and that was before any music was written. So it's actually like pretty much a free flowing um, thing that we have. Everyone seems to be into it, which is nice. We don't have like a lot of contrarianism in the band. Everyone sort of like knows their lane and they stay in it. Yeah.
Yeah, the one thing that I noticed about this album was in regards to the drums. It's at like some points it felt like there was a little bit more percussion added into this record,
Yeah.
and then I noticed that you had like a guest percussionist, and is he the one that's smacking what sounds like the pipe on Devils in the Dead-Eye? Like there's like a really high pitch, like I can't I'm trying to figure out, like, for the love of me, like what is that he hitting at? It's like not a china bell, like a dinner bell, like, or something like that, but like that ringing that happens, it's just so like awesome. It's like one of my favorite things about that song. What like added percussion was on the album?
So we had a friend come in and do some percussion on, let's see, what did he lay down percussion on? It was Hovering Human Head Drones,
Yeah.
the beginning of that track, and like throughout that track, they added some percussion, and I'm forgetting like all the names of like the different types of drums that they had, because like I'm not like a well-versed percussionist, but they had their own things. And then also this, what was the more instrumental track, Time Enough Tomorrow. That was actually the track. So I worked that out on acoustic. I showed it to Dave. And then I just had the idea, like, oh, we should have some of our friends come in and like add some percussion, like not include Keith on it, because Keith's actually not even playing on that track, but just have a different perspective, like a different style. And then since they were in the studio, we were like, well, we have this other song, Hovering Human Head Drones, and Keith is playing drums on it. And like, but what if you lay down some of your percussive rhythms on it too, like both under and over, like what's already going on? And they were down for that. And it was a really great experience. It was nice to have like additional musicians contribute, to the proceedings, I guess, if you want to call it that. Yeah.
Yeah. Hovering Human Head Drones is my favorite song on the album. Just the way the song starts with like the drumsticks and then just moving, and like it has a flow on it, and then all of a sudden it's like brutal death metal.
Yeah.
I love that song. So that's interesting. Yeah, that was one of the first things I noticed. Like this, it sounded like you added a little bit more like layering into the drums and stuff like that, and not as well. Even on your last two albums, like there was a lot more intricacies in the drumming and stuff like that, but it felt like it was more filled out with this album. So that's cool to hear. What was probably, if you guys, like, I noticed you guys haven't toured a whole lot. Are you planning to tour with this album at all?
Not really. I don't want to use the word impossible, but it's like close to impossible to tour. I'm going to always say it's mostly because of me, like my young kids and like my work schedule. I just can't leave for like 2, 3, 4 weeks.
Yeah.
I can't do that. I also don't want to do that. I'm just going to be like just straight up honest with people about that. Like, and I'm not saying I don't want to play shows, but like I don't want to be on the road for like 2 weeks or longer, away from like my family and the things that I like love the best. Like, I don't know, I'm like kind of like a homebody like that. I love the creative process. I love making music. I love playing with the guys in the rehearsal studio. I love creating and recording the album and playing like a few shows, but I'm not like a road dog. Like, I'm really not. So that's my side of that story. Dave, he's the bass player. He's also in Helmet, so he tours like a lot, a couple times a year. And it's always at like the times that, well, maybe we would do a tour now because it's like good weather or it's like a good season to go, or it's like, well, he's not here. Which is, it's not like a blame. Like, I'm not like he's good. he's going on tour. Like we can't do it. He'll be away. He's still away now. He's like coming back from Europe this week, I think, and like that's just how it is. So it's real difficult to arrange. I know, Will and Keith are probably a little bit more like easygoing with that. I mean, Will's in a bunch of other bands too, and like
Yeah.
he tours and plays shows whenever. But he just has a little bit less going on than I do. Just not to say his life's not as complicated as mine. And that's just what he wants to do more of that, and I'm just really not able to. It's very challenging for me, so I'll take the blame for any of that not being able to tour.
Do you guys regularly get together and write music when you're done writing albums? Like, do you still just keep the process going?
Yep. Yeah. With all like the hullabaloo of like recording an album and like promoting it and stuff, there's definitely like a valley where maybe we're not as prolific or we're not getting together as much. But we still do. Just the last couple of months, Keith and I already wrote another song. Just me and him, because Dave was on tour, like I mentioned.
Mhm.
And initially, like, there's no need for Will to be there when we're just like writing, especially at the very beginning of the process. Like, he's not going to do anything. Not yet. He needs like full songs. He needs like
Mhm.
recorded where he can like be like, oh, okay, you can like sit there and listen. Like, we're not even there yet. So it's just me and Keith. But there's not much of a dip in productivity, I guess. Even though there is like a little bit of it's not really like a self-imposed hiatus or moratorium on creativity. It's just, okay, well, we're busy and we're trying to do this and that. And we did just record an album. So maybe if we don't get together this month, it's not going to be the end of the world. And now it's the holidays too. The holidays like mess everything
Yeah.
up. Like November and December are always just like, well, if we practice like once a month in those months, then that's fine. And we've managed to write like a whole new song, like I mentioned. So we just keep going because I'm like, I just enjoy writing music so much, and I enjoy playing with Keith and Dave and Will so much that I'm like, why would I stop? Why would we stop? I'm already thinking about the next album. Already thinking about other things, that we might do in the future.
That's really cool. And you guys are all local to each other, right? You're all in New York?
Yeah. Dave lives like 3 blocks away from me.
Oh, really? Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Keith lives a few towns over. He's a decent distance away. Will lives like the farthest, I guess. I mean, he still lives locally, I guess, if you want to say that. It just takes a little bit longer for me to get to his house than whatever. But yeah, we're all pretty local. So it's not like we have to make huge sacrifices in our schedule. Like, well, this guy's coming down for the weekend finally from Maine. He can finally practice. Like, we don't do that. I would
Mm.
probably like just dissolve the band if it like did something like that, because I don't feel like dealing with that sort of thing. I mean, maybe I wouldn't, but I don't know. We'll see. That would be a lot of work. I still love to practice so much that I really look forward to it. So that's why we don't really stop practicing all that much.
Very cool. In terms of, because I know you're the guitar player, in terms of like guitars, are you a huge like gear nerd? Do you have a bunch of guitars and amps or anything like that?
I have like 2 guitars. I have like 1 amp. I have a shitty practice amp too. I have, my pedal board and my pedals, but like I don't really like scour message boards or Facebook pages or anything like that. I'm no, so I'm not like a huge gear nerd. I'm just not. Which is not to say I don't know my way around certain things,
Mhm.
but I know more people other than me are like way into that. I think like Dave's more naturally inclined into that. He knows a lot more about like electronics than I do. I think that's just where his brain goes. Like, I just want to play. I just want to like plug in and play. I want it to sound good, and I'll buy equipment that will help me achieve that end. But I don't really like ruminate on those things too much. I don't my brain doesn't go there. I'm just more creative in that sense. I just want to like play the music and get it to a point where we can record it, and then we can like do some cool stuff in the studio. I'm always like thinking about the end result. I don't want to get bogged down in like the little, like the minutia of like equipment and things like that. Unless someone like hips me to something like, oh, you know, Cody, you might really like this pedal, or did you ever try this sort of amp? Or I noticed you had this type of guitar. Did you ever try it? You know, this sort of guitar with that sort of pickup in it. Like I might, you know, like look into stuff like that, but I'm pretty very basic when it comes to it. Maybe what do they call it? Like meat and potatoes sort of player. Although I don't.
I wouldn't even say that. Like I would say like you have a very organic sound in that it's obvious you don't use like plugins or like really super technical like computerized plugins and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Which is what I probably appreciate a lot with your band is because a lot of the modern day like technical death metal, brutal death metal is very computerized sounding. But you have like it's almost like not a simplified sound at all because you have a very like your guitar tone is just impeccable on this album. Like it's one of the things that I love
awesome.
about this album.
Thank you.
Um, but it is a very organic sound in that it's like very natural sounding and it's not too overproduced or anything like that. So whoever your sound engineer was, they really did a good job with the way the guitars sound on here.
Well, I definitely want it to sound like real,
Mhm.
because we are playing it like in the studio together.
Yeah.
Me, Dave, and Keith. Like we're playing the songs. Like it's not. We're not piecing it together in the studio like just with like little like 3-second clips of this or that. Um, we're playing like the whole song like together, like for real. And there might be like punch-ins, you know, here and there, like, oh, this we did 3 takes and the second take is the best, but then like there's like you hear that thing at 1 minute 43 seconds, like you just like you don't slide as the way you should. I'm like, just punch that in. Like we'll do stuff like that. Um, but we don't really like trigger the drums. We don't like alter the sound that much. Um, and Colin Marston, you know, who recorded the album, you know, for us, you know, he's in Gorguts and Krallis. He's just a pretty
Mhm.
much genius. He helps us achieve that. I mean, we already have the sound, I guess. He just helps us hone it in the studio in a way that makes sense with the final product. You know, he'll say, you know, I'll bring in my amp and we'll like record a little bit with that. And then he'll say, okay, well, what for the second track, I was thinking this, and I'll have this set up. And then he's like, well, I'm going to reamp it through this when we're all done. And, you know, there's a lot of stuff that goes on there that I'm not 100% sure on. That helps, you know, that definitely helps because he knows what we want. We want like a real organic sound. It starts by us playing live. That helps. And then it also helps that Colin knows we don't want, you know, a studio product, if that makes a computerized studio product. We want it to sound like Afterbirth playing, but we don't want it to lose any of that. So he works to achieve that organic quality. And I trust his suggestions. I trust his setup. He knows more about it than I do, which is not to say I'm ignorant or I don't care about those things, because I definitely do. But I'm usually like game for like whatever he has to offer. I'll be like, oh, I set this up like this. What do you think? And I'm like, that works. That's perfect.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I've always been interested in the sound, like the sound side of recording and like what goes into it. So whenever a band posts like a YouTube video of like their recording process and stuff like that, it's usually like one of the first things I watch and listen to. So um all right, we are at 49 minutes, and I wanted to talk about a couple of things that were not related to the album.
We can keep
Just to
going.
pick
You
your,
know, like
yeah, yeah. But in terms of this year, I think this year has been one of the better years for metal as a whole, like not just death metal. Like there's been so many phenomenal releases, like to the point of where I did like a top 50 because there was just so many albums. What are some of your favorite releases that have come out this year? I've seen you
um,
tweet some stuff here and there, but I feel like it doesn't even have to be metal because I have a bunch of ones that are non-metal that I've really enjoyed this year too.
Oh, totally. So I had a feeling people like to ask me stuff like that. So like I don't really keep the stuff on my head. So I'm actually looking at my phone right now,
That's funny.
like to be like, what did I listen to a lot this year? I'm just kind of going through some stuff. I really, as far as like metal goes, there are like a few like really super heavy albums that like I really liked and I gravitated towards right away. So like in no particular order either am I going to say this stuff, but um, The Enduring Spirit by Tomb Mold, obviously I really like that. Super like high tech and like an organic sort of sounding way, like very expansive and expressive. And I had the great honor of hearing that like a few months before it was released, so I kind of like sat with it for a while where I knew like not everyone heard it, and I was like, wow, this is so cool that I'm like listening to this. Like I had like the cover art and like all the music, and I was like, what gods deemed it like befitting of me to hear this before everybody else. I really liked it, and I think they're every bit as of deserving of like the accolades they got for it. But a little bit more like harder hitting or brutal in terms of stuff I liked. Agonal Hymns by Nithing, or is it
Yes,
Nithing? I don't know.
it's Nithing.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
what I thought.
I love that
Like
album
holy
so
fuck!
much.
Like goddamn that
Yeah,
album. I can't wrap my head around it. Really, I like music that I can't wrap my head around it. Like
yeah.
I like music like that. I like movies like that. I like books like that. Like I'm like it leaves me wanting more, but also somehow satisfied that I don't really know what's going on. It's like a movie that like has like an unhappy ending. It's like you didn't really want that, but like you got that, so you just have to sit with it. Or almost like reading like I don't know, like a Thomas Ligotti short story. It's like I don't know what the fuck I just read, but like it's perfect that way. So Agonal Hymns by Nithing. What is it? Makeshift Crematoria by Trichomoniasis. That
That was good too.
Jesus Christ, like that.
Yeah.
Even more extreme than the Nithing album. Like, because like I listened to it a bunch, and even the other day I went for a walk, and I'm like, there are no riffs here. Like, I don't know what's going on. Like, and it's cool. And being that I really like ambient music, noise, and experimental music, I'm like, that's how I approach an album like that. I'm like, obviously there's drums going on, there's guitar, but it's like you can't try to make any sense of it. It's crazy that the individuals responsible for it can play it and they make some sense out of it, I think, when they're recording and playing it. But that was definitely one. What is it? Hang on, I don't remember the name of this album, so I remember the name of the band, but I can't remember the name of the album, so I'm just scrolling.
So Matt, that's in Neathing, is also in Vitriol.
Vitriol,
He's
yeah,
just
exactly.
yeah. He just his musicianship is just again. I feel like everybody should get to know who he is and hear what he can do. Like he posts reels on his Instagram
Oh, I
of
watched
his
those.
drumming, and yeah. So I think you were probably one of the first people I saw, aside from Pat Russ, who's Crypticus on
Yeah,
Twitter and Instagram, like post that album. You might have be the reason why I even listened to it, to be honest with you.
I just like stumbled across that. I don't even really know. This is what we were talking about earlier about like album art. I think I just saw the album art. I'm like, that looks
Yeah.
wild. That looks like. I hope the music sounds like the way that Screaming Face looks, and it like definitely did.
Yeah. Yeah, for
The
sure.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say that that's such an awesome album. I love the artwork too. I kind of want to get a T-shirt now. I'm
It's
thinking
pretty
about
sick.
it.
The Fragmentation Stratagem album by Paroxysm Unit, like that album is like fucking out there. It's a little bit more cohesive than the last two I mentioned in terms of brutal death metal, because like both the Nithing and the Trichomoniasis albums, like they're completely I mean, this is all unhinged music, but like those two sound particularly unhinged. The Paroxysm Unit sounds really wild, but like just slightly more polished, which is cool too, because you can literally hear everything that's going on. And I just really appreciate that. And then the new Deliquest album, Cursed with Malevolence. I love that band.
I have not heard that one yet. Interesting.
It's
I'm adding
it's
these
wild.
to a Google Doc.
I believe that they're from Australia.
Okay.
And they put out. I'm just gonna just search my Bandcamp for it. So bear with me here. They put out like a demo. Okay, maybe it's an EP, but they put out. What year was this? This was 2020, so 3 years ago, which is like a long time in extreme metal terms. They put out like this. I think it's 4 songs. I don't know if they're calling it a demo or an EP, but it's called Engineered Frailty. Again, the band is Deliquest. And I don't know. I just heard it and like my jaw dropped because they're from Australia, but they sound like they could be from New York, Long Island, from like 1998 or something like that. In terms of like, it's like brutal death metal. It's got like a hardcore sort of beat down vibe to it. It's just wild stuff. Really, really wild stuff. I really, enjoy it. I probably haven't listened to it as much as I should. I've listened to the album maybe like 3 or 4 times through only, but I love what they're doing. I could go on and on and on about like all this stuff, but there's definitely I'm just scrolling through all this. I'm like, oh my god, this is awesome, this is awesome, this is awesome. But I know I can't really mention anything, mention everything. That what is it? Blackened Cerebral Riffs by Dead and Dripping. That was like another.
Oh yeah, Dead and Dripping is awesome.
Sick album.
That was a good album.
As far as death metal and things like that, those stick out. There was some great other stuff that came out this year. I'll just mention. So I mentioned Tomb Mold. I think the drummer, Max is the drummer's name. If I'm if I'm remembering correctly, he has like this ambient noise project called Death Kneel, and he put out a new album on a label called Chondritic Sound, and they've just put out so much noise and almost unlistenable music, at times. And I don't know what it was that drew me to it. Like the cover art's really wild, and then I listened to it, and it's outright noisy at first, but then it's like much more organic and textured, like as the album like progresses. It's called Dawn Simulation. I really, really like it. It's just fantastic. Gnaw Their Tongues put out another album finally this year. Like they hadn't put out an album in like a long time. I don't know if you know them, but the album's called The Cessation of Suffering. I was like way into them like around 2009, 2010. They were just doing like blackened ambient noise with like a black metal vibe to it at times. Not outright black metal, just horrific stuff, almost unlistenable, just like a strain on the ears, but I'm into anything that they do, and I'll just leave it at that. Like I got plenty of stuff I like, but I don't want this to be about my top 300 albums of 2023.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Tomb Mold, and like I don't care if anybody like goes after me for that. Like in terms of $20 spin, they're one of those labels similar to Willow Tip, where it's just anything they put out, I'll buy it for the most part.
Yeah, why not? You're gonna get quality,
Right. And the new Tomb Mold album, I really, really enjoyed. I feel like I probably need to spend even more time with it.
I do too.
But I think, there's a lot. Like Derek is a really intricate guitarist too, and like for the stuff that he writes, especially with his Dream Unending band that he has. And I know some people were kind of disappointed that kind of bled into Tomb Mold, but I also think like that seemed like the natural progression that they were going to move into.
It's like inevitable. Like how?
Yeah.
It's very hard for me to understand how people can be very compartmentalized in how they like approach certain things. Like I'm like, there's no way I'm like that, and for better or for worse, So like when I heard the new Tomb Mold and some of it reminded me of Dream Unending, I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense. And I wasn't like, oh, that stinks that he did that. I'm like, what? No, like it makes sense that it happened. Like, how can you separate those two things?
Yeah. No, I do. I love that album. I also I got really into brutal death metal this year. Like for a while there, I kind of took a step back from a lot of the newer releases and just didn't pay much attention. But this year I found myself buying a lot more than I ever have been. So that's the other like genre that like people pretty much when they like think of Melanie Loves Death Metal, they usually associate me to like the meat and potatoes death metal, like brutal death metal, and
Yeah.
then they're like shocked when I bring something slightly different into the conversation. And I was like, I don't just only listen to that style of music. Like
Oh, of course.
probably 90% of my day is that, but I need like a palate cleanser here
Oh
and
yeah.
there. So do you listen to black metal at all? I know you mentioned that when writing the album, some of the stuff sounded black metal to you on Beaver Mosh's podcast, and I was like, I definitely don't hear that, but that was an interesting comment that you made.
So I don't listen to like a whole lot of black metal, like for sure. Just some of the riffs that I had sounded, I guess, blackened. Maybe I shouldn't say
Yeah,
black
okay.
because I know
Okay.
black metal purists would like
Yeah.
burn me at the stake, for even like mentioning the genre of black metal in relation to anything that I'm doing. And there's some interesting stuff going on in black metal. It's overall a niche genre that hasn't ever like held my attention for too long a period of time. If anything, I'm into maybe more post black metal things that take
Yeah.
influence from black metal. And again, the purists that they want to like, crucify me for that because I'm not like as cult as they are, then that's cool because like I'm happy and
Yeah.
that's all that matters. Yeah.
I just started really listening to black metal probably about 4 years ago. It was never, I think the whole gimmicky stuff around it kind of deterred me, even though I'm a huge like King Diamond Merciful Fate fan.
Sure.
For some reason, I just always felt like that they were just trying to copy that, which is obviously there's a lot of influence in that. But I just started, I think really within the last 4 years, I've really started to dive more into it. And but there are like those death metal purists too that really don't like that I have been trying to talk more about it on my channel. But it is always interesting. Like I feel like for the most part, it's a genre that I enjoy, but the whole like cult aspect of it is definitely not something that I consider myself at all. So
Yeah.
I think
I'm no expert on it, at all.
yeah, no, not at all. And I think if anything, social media is the reason why I know what bands are popular and like what are people are listening to. And that's been like the good thing about social media for me. But obviously there's that whole entire like even on the death metal side, there's that whole entire aspect that people are just so like one dimensional and they tend to, bring that kind of mentality into like my comments and stuff like that. And I do a really good job of just like don't watch that. Like,
Just
why are you
all the
bothering with this?
people. I mean,
Yeah.
whatever. People want to be gatekeepers, like, like it's
Yeah.
an Olympic sport. I'm like, no one's keeping score. No one cares. You got like your 5 little followers and like they're like harping on everything you say and you just love to dogpile on people and it like doesn't
Yeah.
even make any sense. Like just let people like stuff. Like seriously, like let them like stuff.
Yeah. The one thing I noticed that you were doing is when people were reviewing the album, you were being really open and honest with them about like, yeah, I totally understand why you don't like it. Like, I appreciate you trying to listen to it. So that I enjoy. Like, I need to get more into that mentality of things because like criticism is not something that people take very well. But in terms of like what like I've just been seeing like that interaction stuff like that. So appreciate that. It's nice. That's refreshing to see because sometimes it can get a little bit toxic when it comes to like the social media thing and people are like yeah
is a
so
big toxic sewage dump.
yeah
And
for sure.
I'm guilty of like joining in sometimes.
Oh yeah.
But people can't like everything. On the same side of that, people can't like everything. So I don't expect them to like everything. I don't expect everyone to like my album or my band. If they review it, I'm like, well, holy shit, you listen to it at least. Like that's more than a lot of people are doing. and maybe you only listened to it once, and maybe that's not enough to form like an educated opinion about it, but like you did listen to it and then you wrote something about it and posted it. And like as long as like you're not insulting me, like saying, you know, I don't know, whatever, you know, that guitarist is a real cunt and I hate him and I wish he would die. Like I'm glad, you know, you're not writing anything like that. Um, then it's all good. And I'm like, I always try to be like open minded and let people say what they want to say as long as it's not hurtful. Um, I'm just too old for it too. You know, I'm older
Yeah.
than a lot of like younger death metal people, and I do this for fun. I do this for sheer passion. I don't do it for like ego or bravado or brownie points. Like I make music for myself. Bottom line, I don't give a shit if anybody likes it. It's amazing that people do. That is like the best gift for me. Um, I would defend myself if needed, but like I don't really feel like I try not to get involved in stuff like that, and I kind of know people to stay away from on the internet because I'm like, this dude is never going to change. Like he's never going to
Yeah.
listen to reason. Maybe when he gets older and after he's like, you know, been through more than I have, they might. Also, as I'm getting older, I'm like, sometimes I'll leave comments or I'll say this or that. Again, you know, not belittling people or invalidating people, but just saying, well, I like this or I didn't like it. Just an opinion. Then I post it and then I'll think about it. And like, was that like a boomer take? Did that sound like an old person would write that? I'm like, I hate to come across like that. So a lot of times I don't even say anything because I'm like, I don't want to be misunderstood either. I'm like, I don't want to be like, oh, shut up, boomer. You don't know what's cool or not. I'm like, yeah, maybe I don't know what's cool anymore. Maybe that's why I write the music I do because I don't fucking know what's cool. I just like write what I like. I don't write music to like for you, you know, or, you know, to like it or to get more heart reactions from people. I don't really give a shit about that stuff.
Yeah. I think it's
Forgot
a
what we
good
were really talking
mentality.
about, but
Yeah. No, it's definitely a good mentality to go into. Like, I think for me, Twitter is pretty much my outlet to tell those people to F off
yeah,
because like they assume I like everything. And I was like, well, my channel is focused around the things that I like. I'm not going to make a 2 hour long video about an album that I don't like. What,
well,
like,
what,
there's just no point for me to do that.
you know,
Like, I
what's the
want people to
point of that?
listen to music. Yeah.
You know, I see,
So,
I'll see like reviews sometimes of mostly on like Metal Archives. You know, we've all seen it. It's like a
oh, of course.
long-winded review, and it's like 5%. I'm like, why would you waste so much time like
I don't know.
dumping all over this? Like, you hate this so much, dude. You could have been out walking with your dog. You could have been just drinking coffee, enjoying a good book. You could have been playing with your kid. You could have been high riding your bike, and instead, you sat in your room for probably hours on end, you know, like firing off this like crappy missive about something you hate. And it's fine that you hate stuff. Like, okay, you're passionate about something, but dude, it's misguided. Direct it elsewhere, you know? Like
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of my questions was gonna be like, do you read the album reviews? And then I saw that you were interacting on social media. So I was like, well, yeah, they obviously read them. Um,
I
I
I
don't
I scour the internet for reviews and I read every single one if I can because I'm interested in it. I know Dave avoids it. Will kind of. I don't know. Maybe he looks, but not as much as I do. I think Keith kind of looks more, maybe just like stumbles upon stuff. But I like actively search for stuff. I want to know what people have to say, not because I need it to stroke my ego or I need the dopamine to make sure I feel like I'm loved and liked by people that are complete strangers to me. I
mhm.
like to know what people are thinking. Like I get off on that. It's all part of my creative process. Like so I did all this work. Now people are listening to it. It's cool for me to read what they're thinking. And I don't always agree with what they're thinking, but I it's freedom of choice and they can do whatever they want. But I do try to read every review.
Has anybody approached you about doing any sort of a collaboration or split? I feel like this album got a lot of more like press, like a lot more people know who you guys are with this album.
Yeah, it definitely got like a lot of press. It got a lot of hype, way more reviews, way more like mentions. No one really has like come outright and like said we should do something. Actually, Pete from Replicant, the guitarist
Oh,
in
nice.
Replicant, I don't know you probably know that band. He
Yep.
did mention something about they had like an extra track from the album they're about to release, and it would be cool if we did have an extra track. Maybe we could like put out like a split. Um, we haven't really discussed it since he just like casually mentioned it to me once. Um, he's the only one. I would love to do something with Replicant because they're like one of my favorite like newer US death metal bands, even though they're not like super new. But yeah, no one from Sanguisugabog or Cannibal Corpse or Tune Mold is like knocking on my door yet. Even though I think those guys like our album.
I'm pretty sure like Corpse Grinder listens to everything.
Yeah.
He's similar to Max Cavalera in that he really invests his time into the genre and in learning the new bands and like staying up to date. So they're good ambassadors, I feel like, for the metal community,
Yeah.
despite what people might say or
Yeah,
think.
it's cool to like. I mean, I love being on top of as much as I can new stuff. I don't. There's no way I can listen to everything that's new, but I like to be
Mhm.
aware of what's going on, even if I just sort of like scan through it like a radio station. Like I don't have spreadsheets. I don't keep lists of streams. Like I don't do that. I know people do that. Sometimes they
I
do it.
do. Yeah.
Sometimes they do it because it's fun. Sometimes they do it because they're neurotic. Sometimes they do it because I don't know. Like, and I'm not even like poo-pooing anybody's reason for doing it. I just don't do it. I don't have time to do it. I'm not interested in doing it. I try to like listen to new stuff as much as I can. Um, I take in as much as I can because there's a lot of new music and a lot of it's amazing. It's really wild. I wish I could buy everything from everybody. I wish I could like leave a comment on everyone's page and let everyone know how much I love it, but I just, I can't do that. Um,
Do you collect music at all, like vinyl or anything like that?
yeah, I do, and I wouldn't say I'm like a collector, but I have a decent amount of vinyl, a decent amount of cassettes now, and a lot of CDs because I've always been like buying CDs. I definitely stopped buying CDs for a while, but I've sort of like I had maybe like 8 years ago, a year or so, where I stopped buying any physical media. Just wasn't interested in doing it. I did still buy digital albums. I bought a boatload of albums digitally, and then I slowly got back into it again. And then got like around the time the pandemic was around, a lot of people. I just got way back into cassettes and vinyl, so I just started buying it. And I even told my wife like the other day, I was like, I was gonna try to like curb like my spending habits, which I don't buy a lot, but
Mhm.
it's mostly because I don't have a lot of space. But then I told her, I'm like, I kind of decided against that, and I'm gonna just do stuff I really like because I don't have a whole lot of stuff that I like. So why should I like curtail like my habits if it's not bothering anyone? I'll just have to buy like more sensible vinyl storage. That's it. Like I can't have everything
Yeah.
out on a shelf. If I have to have like strong, sturdy vinyl storage boxes and they're like in the corner of my room, like so be it. Like I want music because again, similar how I want to like eventually one day retire and have a space to create art. I'm like one day when my kids are older and I'm alone more often, I hope to have a space of my own again that's like not infiltrated by like children. And buying physical media is real important to me and I want to have this and I will put the time and effort into it, especially at a time now where people like are over relying on digital and like those things can be taken away in like just like that because somebody at Disney bought out X, Y, and Z record labels and now just decides they don't want that online because they want to create a false sense of scarcity. And then they're going to release it again 5 years from now, exactly the same, but they'll tell you it's brand new and you'll pay $500 extra for it.
Yep.
Like I don't jive with that. Like I know people think they're smart and they're going to do that. Like they're going to like try to like one up people. They're going to try to like fleece people out of their money. I'm like, well, I'm just going to like have this stuff on physical media. And so I'm still buying new albums on vinyl, but I've kind of been like, well, I'm gonna find like what classic stuff that I like that I never had on vinyl, so I can have it in the future because it might disappear one day, and then I still want it. So I do collect to some extent. I
Yeah.
know I probably have in my collection as many vinyl albums that some people have bought just this year alone, but it's okay. I don't need to have like the largest number of vinyl records in my collection. Like I'll let other people sort of like fight that out in other, internet
Yeah.
battles, not me.
I this year, so past years, I've pretty much just bought things without listening to it, and just
Yeah.
it was a band I knew I liked, I bought it and I listened to it, and then it sat on the shelf for a while after that. So this
Hmm.
year I was a little bit more conscious of listening to an album before buying it.
Hmm.
But there were some instant like pre-orders that I just knew.
Yeah.
But since I started doing reviews, I've been getting like promotional emails and copies and stuff like that. So that has unfortunately impacted my collecting, because now I'm hearing things in advance. I'm like, well, I'm definitely ordering this now. And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, this is kind of like a curse now. I'm like, I'm killing my wallet because I'm hearing these things so much farther in advance. Um, but for the Afterbirth album, I have the copy that was delayed in pressing because of the color variant.
Yeah. The
But
ghostly or whatever it is. I don't know.
it but it looks so good.
It
And
looks
it
awesome.
sounds, yeah. And I think Jason may have commented on my post about it and how he found like a different pressing plant and they did really good. And hopefully, so that I thought that was pretty cool. I like
Yeah.
that you guys are on Willow Tip now. Willow Tip is probably a little bit underrated label in my opinion.
Yeah.
Um, they put out a lot of good releases this year. I actually have like I pulled some stuff to show, like the Diva Angelic is one of my favorite albums that came out this year. Like I listened to that.
Intense.
But yeah, but I like that you guys are. I think you guys fit really well on that label because they have a lot of unique bands on their just under their belt and as a whole. So that made me happy. But I do hope someday I'll be able to get some of your earlier demos in
Yeah.
physical format. Um, and I did miss out on a couple of other things, but for the most part, I'm happy. So yeah, I get like that with certain bands. Like I want
Of
to try and
course.
get everything.
I
Yeah.
have I have
So
that with certain bands too, or just it's sort of like a compulsion even to like just to want to buy everything a band has or whatever for whatever reason, that impetus is like in my brain. Like I want to
yeah.
do that too. But Willow Tip is definitely like a label I'm happy with. I feel like we fit on Willow Tip. Um, I was even just emailing Jason this morning about some other things, and we just sort of like we're talking about that. Um, and I reached out to Jason before the Time Traveler's Dilemma was even out. I sent that to him as a demo before there were vocals on it, I think. The album was recorded, but Will hadn't joined the
Mm.
band yet, or something like that. And he was really into it, and I was like, "Holy shit! Like we might be on Willow Tip." And then like communication with him just like stopped, and I was like, "Oh, that's really weird." And like I'm trying not to take it personal, but because it's just business, seriously,
Mhm.
it's just
Yeah.
business. Um, and so then we hopped on Unique Leader. We had two albums on them, and that whole time, like I was still thinking, like, what the hell happened with Willow Tip? Like, because they're still putting out albums, but they didn't want to talk to me. I'm like, I didn't take it personal, but it was like I still thought about it so much because I was like slightly like upset about it. And then we ended up leaving Unique Leader early. We were supposed to put out 3 albums, but things weren't going well. So I sent them an email laying everything out, and they were basically like, "We agree." So we left.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
yeah, I'm glad it didn't end completely acrimoniously, even though there's some smoldering embers there that have yet to be
Yeah.
snuffed out, unfortunately. And then, I told Jason was like the first person I emailed. I'm like, dude, we're not on Unique Leader anymore. Where are you? And he basically he's like, can you send me those emails? I just want to make sure that like, I totally believe you, but I just want to see them. and he was like, "I'll just send over a contract." And he was saying how he felt bad that he stopped contact with me, but he had some family stuff going on, is what I heard later on. Which you got to respect that. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because when things happen, you just can't ignore your family. Um, so at least I had an answer to my question of like why he stopped communicating with me, and he like felt bad that he did in a way. I mean, I'm not saying like he was like so filled with remorse that he never got over it. He just he was like, oh, I felt bad that I never got back to you, and then your 2 albums on Unique Leader came out, and like I was like, he didn't say this in so many words, but he was like sort of like regretting that he didn't get in touch with me, so we could have put those albums out on Willow Tip. But whatever. I'm not a person that thinks everything works out for a reason. That's too like nonsense, too much nonsense
Yeah.
for me. But it did work out for in whatever ways and reasons it did work out, and here we are in Willow Tip. So I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I feel like the distribution of Willow Tip is a little bit more easy for people to get access to your music as well. Unique Leader was pretty limited with that. I mean, they're relatively, I don't know how small they are, honestly, but like in terms for Willow Tip, I was happy to see that. Because like I waited to order your vinyl until after I really like digested the record.
Hmm.
And because I just knew like with the way that they do their like merchandise, they allow enough for people to be able to have their hands on it. And
Yeah.
I always thought like if I can't get the record, then I'll still buy the CD or the tape.
Yeah, you'll get one version of
Yeah.
it somehow or another.
So that's one of the things about the label that I really enjoy, and just the overall like lineup that they put out this year. They had a lot of really good releases this year, probably more than I've ever paid attention to in recent years. But yeah, I think I shot you a message one time on Twitter and asked like, "Are you ever gonna repress your tapes?" And I didn't like put two and two together. I'm like, "All right, those are on Unique Leader, so
Yeah.
probably not." But I don't. Are you aware that like your first two albums on cassette are like cult underground? Like people are trying to get those and like find them and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, like as far as I know, Unique Leader only pressed up a small bit of CDs and
Right.
vinyl, and then we worked with Lifeless Chasm to
Yes.
make the cassette versions of those that turned out like really sick.
Yeah.
Um, and then we actually then put the cassettes out as well in a much more limited version, like two of them together. It was like a set, like you couldn't buy them separately. Um, and then all of that like sold out, relatively
Yep.
quickly.
Yep.
And then I don't know, like we have the rights to put the albums out again on cassette. I don't know if we will again. I just there's just other stuff going on, so I'm not even like
Mhm.
thinking about it. I'm still trying to work some stuff out with Unique Leader, and I'm just not going to say anything else.
Okay. Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Is like, is there a chance that they'll get reissued? but
I don't
hopefully.
know what to say about them. It's not quite like a dragged into sunlight prosthetic records type situation. I don't know
Mm,
if you know about that, but I don't have a lot of good things to say about them. It's very frustrating, and
yeah.
the direction the label went, like after Eric passed away, it just wasn't what it was, and that's fine. Things change, time moves on. But their prerogatives are just not my prerogatives, and I don't know what they're doing really.
Yeah. I actually got lucky and I did a trade with a friend of mine and he gave me the record in the trade. So this is kind of like a relic that I'm never going to get rid of now because, for that reason. But yeah, so someday it'll happen someday. One of my friends who's out in New Zealand, he's a collector that I met on Instagram. Is the reason why I know who your band is. Like a couple of years ago, he was like, "Hey, like there's this band called Afterbirth, and like check out these cassettes." And so he must have gotten them through Lifeless Chasm, which I love Lifeless Chasm. I haven't bought from them in a while. I
Mhm.
kind of slowed down on collecting the tapes,
Yeah.
and that's the whole reason why I learned who your band was, because just the overall like artwork and everything drew me in. I was like, that looks interesting. Um, but yeah, I thought I would shoot my shot and see if it was possible.
Yeah.
Um,
I
well,
mean,
that was all that I wanted to like talk about today.
all right, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. One of the things that I did want to mention is I always do like a year-end giveaway on my channel just to like thank everybody for the support. So I did buy an extra copy of Afterbirth. So I'm planning on giving that away for my
Nice,
listeners.
nice.
So that's pretty much
Happy.
my
That's
announcement for that. Yeah. One thing I would love is hopefully sometime next year, is follow up and maybe just do just like a normal like stream where we talk about just music that we like in general and maybe show some stuff in our collection.
I
So
would love
happy
to
to
do
have you
that.
back. Yeah, for
I would love
sure.
to do that because I love just talking about music in general. I'm a big music fan, in addition to being a musician. I buy music all the time, you know. I like talking about it. A lot of music I like, I don't talk about with other people because, especially like
Mm,
the noisy stuff, I'm like, I don't have like any friends that like this stuff. Very few. But then, all the metal music that I buy, like, there's plenty of things to talk about with that. I mean, like, I'd
yeah,
be happy to show off whatever cassette or CD or vinyl album I just bought, or just talk about how much I love whatever band that comes up in the course of conversation. That would be awesome.
for sure. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, sweet. Thanks, Melanie. I appreciate
And yeah, thank you. And I will see everybody in the next video whenever I post it.
it. All right. Bye. Thanks. Happy New Year and happy
Yeah.
holidays.
Oh, yeah. Happy New Year.
Take